Hello, I'm Hannah, and this is Hannah's Books. Today, I want to play out some of the possible ideas for what I want to read during 2025. Every year, I make a long list of possibilities, often organized into either theme months or a track through an author over the course of a year, or something like that. And by the end of the year, I've often read several books off those lists. But a whole lot of the books I choose to read are not on those lists. So please note that what I talk about today are merely ideas, not commitments or goals. In fact, my main bookish goal is not actually reading related at all. It's to participate here, both as a person who makes videos as well as a viewer more regularly than I was able to in 2024. Given that main goal, I still want to talk about some of the baskets or categories that shape my reading choices. First, the biggest basket I want to read from is American literature and its connection to history and culture. I've mentioned this possible project before on this channel. I would love to spend a month focusing on the literature and history of the Dust Bowl, for example, or something on transcendentalism and both the fiction and nonfiction that was part of that New England moment. I'd like to talk about some of the American regionalism books I read last year but didn't discuss, and also talk about the Harlem Renaissance and maybe the so-called Gilded Age period when there were dramatic changes in the country's economics, etc. As I started making lists of classic American texts that might represent particular historical periods or literary periods, I started to see a big problem. The first is that I want to be the reader here, not to be a professor teaching a class. I don't want to start feeling like I have to read these books in chronological order or make a clear picture or narrative about the whole sweep of American literature or the sweep of American history. I don't want to feel responsible for reading all the, quote, important American books. Instead, I want to be able to post without worrying that I have everything exactly right. I want to be able to skip stuff I've either read recently or have no interest in reading for whatever reason. I have yet to figure out exactly how organized or extensive I'll be about this project, and I think I want to play it by ear rather than make a commitment in advance. Right now, I'm thinking that I will do my best to make an organized playlist where I put videos in some kind of order, even if I don't make or post the videos in order. This project, in other words, is going to be quite fly-by-night. As always, I would love to hear if you have any book recommendations or any sub-theme ideas or whatever, or any general advice about the project as a whole. So, the next basket or category, which is also big and important, is social reading, like buddy reads and group reads, as well as Booktube events. One big group read for the year is The Year of Proust. In Search of Lost Time is essentially a 4,000-page novel, broken up into 6 or 7 books. Personally, I have only committed to the first book, and depending on how it goes, I may or may not follow up. I'm not very far in yet, but I'm loving the lush prose and the evocative imagery. We'll see how that goes. I may be eating madeleines with y'all at the end of December when the group wraps up after reading all of In Search of Lost Time. Another major group reading project is the incredible Author Spotlight Salons, where participants read a variety of each author's books, in chronological order, I believe, headed up by Sarah at Hardcover Hearts. Last year, at a really crazy period of my life, I had the great pleasure of reading many of the books of Elizabeth Bowen with other amazing readers who were participating. I've rarely interacted with a more brilliant and thoughtful group of readers, and I'm hoping to participate again this year in at least one of the chosen authors. This year's authors include Tove Jansson, Rebecca West, Molly Keene, Dorothy Whipple, Olivia Manning, etc. To be honest, if I weren't obsessed with the idea of looking closely at American literature and history, I would be participating in all of these salons. Okay, in addition to these large group reads, I have a couple of two-person buddy reads already scheduled for the year. You'll be hearing more about those later. And Booktube events will definitely shape my reading too. A few old favorites are Jane Austen July, Faulkner in August, Shakespeare in September, Victober, Nonfiction November, and there are many more. And finally, my last big basket or category, or maybe the final goal, is to write more book reviews for publication during 2025 than I did in 2024. Only in Open Letters Review for now. I have tons of ebooks on NetGalley, recent releases and future releases, as well as a stock of advanced physical copies sent by publishers, all of which I need to get to. Most, but not all, of the new releases I want to read for review are nonfiction, often biography or history. A few of the fiction offerings I'm thinking of reviewing are reissues of classics, many of which just went out of copyright and are being published in new editions with great new annotations or introductions by interesting scholars or authors, many of which I talked about during Hannah's Book Ago. And speaking of reviewing, I'd really like to read more literary criticism this year, written by other people. I just resubscribed to several journals, including the New York Review of Books, the London Review of Books, and the Times Literary Supplement. And I read my neighbor's New York Times Book Review, as well as my library's online versions of magazines like The New Yorker. I can't keep up with them all, but I'll definitely be poking around in them. And in addition to new book criticism, I'd really like to read some older classic collections of literary essays by some classic bookish people, from Virginia Woolf to Clifton Fadiman to Clive James, etc. Well, to wrap up this discussion today, I thought I might try to respond to a relevant tag. It takes a totally different approach to the question of what might be showing up on our nightstands this year, and that is the New Year, New Me book tag created by Kevin Toll. I will link to his channel below. I decided I wanted to do the tag after seeing great versions on Jim's Books, Reading, and Stuff, Angelia's channel Read and Reread, and Kelly's channel Books I'm Not Reading. And then this morning, I saw that the amazing Pat at Book Chat with Pat had tagged me. What perfect timing. Thanks to all of you. Let's get straight into the questions. Number 1, fears. What is the one book from your 2025 reading list that scares you? I'm always scared of long books, and reading a 4,000-page novel like Proust's In Search of Lost Time might be the craziest idea anyone has ever had, except for the person who decided to write a 4,000-page novel. I don't know for sure if I will definitely read all the parts or just stop after book 1, but the length is not the only thing that scared me off. Somehow I thought Proust would be incredibly convoluted and hard to understand. At least so far in these early pages, that is absolutely not the case. It is elegantly smooth and easy to read. It does take me longer to read the pages, I think, not because it's hard to understand, but because I find myself sub-vocalizing. That is, saying the words, quote, aloud to myself in my head to hear the sounds and rhythm of the words. So I'm already a lot less afraid of this book. And having the group of fellow newbie Proustians to read it with is quite a gift. Question 2, patience. What is one book on your 2025 possibilities list that you want to start immediately? As of yesterday, during a snowfall that dropped 7 or 8 inches of snow here in my area of Washington, D.C., I impulsively started What Remains, the collected poems of Hannah Arendt, very recently published and translated by Samantha Hill and Ginny Z. Grill. Arendt is not a poet. She was a political theorist, a no-nonsense philosopher whose The Origins of Totalitarianism has reemerged into wide readership in the recent political era. Her poetry was private, carefully packed away, and found in her papers at the Library of Congress. I'll talk more about this book at some point, somewhere, but I love the idea that behind Arendt's hard-hitting intellectual thought, there is a thinker also deeply committed to her emotional life. What a lesson for 2025. We have to balance our outward thinking about the world, including about totalitarianism, with contemplation and a rich interior life. The third question, growth. What book last year pushed you to reflect or grow as a reader? I often feel that books make me grow as a person more frequently than I feel that they help me grow as a reader. But there was actually a bit of an exception this year. I read Ursula Le Guin's The Left Hand of Darkness, and it was radically different from anything else I had read up to that point. I knew it was a book from that vast category of genres I don't read and don't understand, but I read it, and Le Guin's book made me think more deeply than pretty much anything I've read since I started this channel. I plan to make a full discussion of the book sometime soon, so I don't think I'll say much more here. The fourth prompt, new paths. What is one author you plan to try for the first time in 2025? I'm planning to read Larry McMurtry this year, specifically his Lonesome Dove, probably during the Booktube event June on the Range. I'm really not a reader of Westerns. I often hesitate to read what I often think of, perhaps wrongly, as macho books, and Westerns would fall in that basket. On top of that issue, as I've said many times, I'm scared of big books. Nevertheless, everyone I know seems to love this novel and find it emotionally resonant and feel that it just flies by despite its length. When I mentioned the book at some point near the end of 2024, a bunch of you expressed interest in reading it, and I'm hoping a lot of us can bond over it, maybe in June. Prompt number 5, self-care. What is one book you revisit for comfort? I have several, but since I'm a little hyper-focused on American literature right now, I'll name an American book. It's a book that has brought me comfort and joy since I was young, and that is Louisa May Alcott's Little Women. My first copy, which I think I read in 3rd or 4th grade, was an abridgment. I remember picking that edition up to take with me to the doctor's office one time when I was nervous about the appointment. And I've read the full version many times over the years. It feels like part of my DNA in the way only a handful of books do. Question 6, forging ahead. What is your favorite debut book you read last year? I'm not sure this actually counts as a debut book since both of its authors have published before, but this is the first book they wrote together. That's Day's Work by Chris Bachelder and Jennifer Habel. I gather this novel was their pandemic project. Basically, it's the story of a woman obsessed with Herman Melville, trying to fish out, not only the details of his life, but the impact he had on future generations, including not only his biographers, but Elizabeth Hardwick and Robert Lowell, among others. It's also a novel about marriage, and how appropriate that it was jointly written by a married couple. I talk about it in more detail in a previous video, and I will try to link to that. Question 7, goals. Do you have a specific reading goal or challenge for the year ahead? I guess I answered that in my general discussion at the beginning of the video. I do have lots of ideas and even this poorly formed project in mind, but it is all loosey-goosey, and it will remain so on principle. I never choose a specific number of books or even pages for a reading goal. I know that works for a lot of y'all, but I suspect I would read short, easy-to-read books that I don't really care about just to make sure I met the target number. After that, I could start picking up harder choices, longer books, but also books that just take a lot longer to digest, intellectually or emotionally. So I just skip that first part and get straight to the books that slow me down. Slower, yes, but also stickier. Books I think might stick with me over the years. The eighth question, breaking walls. Do you have a non-book related goal for 2025 you wish to share? I love that many of you have chosen to commit to self-care, not the painting of your fingernails while wearing a face mask kind, but instead the kind of work that really fills your cup and keeps you strong and calm. I want that too. And exercise is at the top of my list, as is meditation and healthy food choices. Those have all been commitments I've tried to live up to for decades now. Something I want to reinforce this year is a goal of working to strengthen my community. I guess I mean that in two senses. I want to do service that helps my neighborhood and town. And I want to continue to build on and rely on my relationships with the people I love most, my local circle of friends, as well as a few that are further afield, my son and my brother and other relatives, and all of y'all. To a degree, I've spent the last year and a half oscillating between leaning awfully heavily on my friends and sometimes drawing away to be private. I think I'm ready both to be more fully engaged and to be strong for other people who need friends to lean on. And this may be a year when we really need the support and comfort our friends bring. All years are, but this one might be especially that way. And finally, speaking of community, teamwork, tag others. Because Magic Pat has already done this tag and spread it far and wide, I know many people have already been tagged. Nevertheless, I'm going to name a few people I'd love to hear from down in the comments after I try to cross-check and see who hasn't yet been tagged. Well, that will do it for today. Thank you, Kevin, for creating this tag, and thanks, Pat, for tagging me. And of course, thanks to all of you for joining me today here on Hannah's Books. See you soon.